For centuries, the Galactic Council had upheld a simple but powerful law: no one touches human children. It was a sacred rule, respected by every race in the galaxy. The law was the foundation of peace between the galaxy's many species. Humans, though young and new to the galactic scene, were protected by this unspoken truth. No one would harm them. The law had been put in place long before humanity made contact with the stars. When the first human ships entered space, the Galactic Council met. They saw something in humans, something raw, something different. It was clear that humans could change the galaxy, for better or for worse. So, they made the law: no harm would come to human children. It became a symbol of hope, a promise that peace would last, and that the most vulnerable would be safe. Children were off limits to every species. And for hundreds of years, this law was never broken. Until now, it all started with a small transmission. Earth's military, constantly monitoring all space communication, intercepted a strange signal. It was faint, filled with static, but it was there. The message was encrypted, but they managed to decode it. What they found made their hearts race with terror. The transmission showed images, grainy at first, then clearer, of a Galactic Council ship in a dark corner of the galaxy. The footage was brief, but it was enough. The message was unmistakable. Human children were being taken. At first, no one could believe it. How could this happen? The law was sacred. No one would dare break it. But the transmission was too clear to ignore. Children were disappearing from colonies far away from Earth, taken without explanation. Who could do this? And why? The news spread quickly through the ranks of Earth's leaders. Some were in denial, but deep down, they feared what it meant. The Galactic Council, the governing body of the entire galaxy, had broken the most sacred rule. It wasn't just a small mistake. It was a betrayal of everything they had promised. Earth was in danger, but the government was too frightened to act. The Council had the power to crush any resistance. To accuse them of breaking the law would be risky, and no one knew how they would respond. Would they deny it? Would they turn on Earth? Always. Would they destroy Earth's defenses and make the human race pay for its insolence? For days, Earth's leaders did nothing. They waited, hoping the transmission was a mistake. But the missing children kept appearing in reports from colonies across the galaxy. More families vanished. More children were taken. The whispers began. Some called it a rogue operation. Others believed the Council had become corrupt. But no one knew the truth. The Galactic Council had always been seen as infallible, the keepers of peace, the ones who maintained order across the stars. They could not have done this. Could they? But there was one thing the Earth leaders couldn't ignore: the fear. The fear that if they didn't act quickly, the Council would take more. Worse yet, they feared the true reason behind the disappearances. What if the Council wasn't just taking children? They were using them for something darker. Something that could endanger all of humanity? As Earth's leaders debated, a small group of humans began to investigate on their own. They were not soldiers. They were civilians, scientists, diplomats, and curious minds. They knew that if they didn't act, no one would. They started to dig into the Council's history, looking for answers in old records, hidden files, and whispers from those who had once worked for the Council. And what they discovered sent shivers down their spines. The Galactic Council's leadership was not united. There were factions within the Council, some seeking power, some seeking control, and some simply hungry for more. The most dangerous faction, it seemed, was one that had long been hidden in the shadows. This faction believed that the only way to secure their place in the galaxy was to control humanity. But they didn't want to control humanity as a whole. They wanted to control the children, the young minds, the next generation. As the truth began to unfold, Earth's leaders were forced to confront the impossible reality. The Galactic Council had broken its own law, and now humanity's most vulnerable were in danger. The people demanded answers, but the government was silent. The Council's betrayal sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. No one knew what would happen next, or how far this dark conspiracy went. Could the Council be stopped, or had they already gone too far? The law had been broken, and now Earth had to decide what to do about it. The clock was ticking, and the future of humanity hung in the balance. The fear spread like wildfire across the galaxy. What was happening to the children? No one knew for sure, but the whispers were growing louder. Children were disappearing from Earth's colonies, and the Galactic Council, once a trusted symbol of order, was at the center of it all. The small group of civilians, scientists, diplomats, and those once trusted by the Council continued their investigation. They could no longer stand by and wait for answers from Earth's leaders, who were too scared to act. Time was running out. They decided to travel to one of the affected colonies, a peaceful farming world on the edge of the galaxy. It had once been a thriving colony, home to hundreds of families. But now, the colony was eerily quiet. The once bustling streets were empty, and whispers of fear hung in the air. When the small team arrived, they were greeted with a cold silence. The children, once seen running and playing in the streets, were nowhere to be found. Only the parents remained, looking lost and broken. There was no sign of the kids, just empty homes, empty schools, and empty parks. But the fear was tangible. It had become clear that the children weren't just missing. They had been taken. The team met with a local farmer who had seen something strange on the day the children disappeared. "I saw them," he whispered. "Men in dark suits. They came at night, took the children in silence. The council promised us protection, but where were they when we needed them?" His voice cracked, and the group knew this was no ordinary abduction. Something far darker was at play. The team recorded everything. The farmer spoke of how the children had been selected, chosen for their youth and innocence. They had been taken without warning, without reason. No ransom, no demands. Just the cold, silent disappearance of every child between the ages of 5 and 10. Back on Earth, the government had finally started to take action, but it was too little, too late. They sent a small fleet of ships to investigate, but the Council's forces intercepted them before they could reach the colony. It was clear that the Council was involved in the disappearances, and that they were doing everything they could to cover up their tracks. A message was sent to the rebel group. "You must find out what's happening before it's too late. If the Council is behind this, there's no telling how many other colonies are at risk." The rebel team gathered their supplies and set out for a hidden research station in the remote reaches of space. They had to know more. They had to understand what the Council wanted with the children, and why they had been taking them in secret. The clues were scattered, and each one seemed to lead them deeper into a web of lies and betrayal. The deeper they dug, the more unsettling the truth became. They uncovered records that revealed the Council's growing obsession with human children. It wasn't just about power or control. It was about something far more sinister. The children were being used for experiments that could change the future of the galaxy forever. The experiments, it seemed, were designed to unlock the potential hidden within human children. These children were being genetically altered, infused with powers no one had seen before. Some were given enhanced strength, others advanced intelligence, and a few were even said to possess strange, psychic abilities. The Council believed these children held the key to controlling the galaxy. But the most chilling discovery was yet to come. The children weren't just being experimented on. They were being turned into weapons, living weapons with powers that could wipe out entire civilizations. It was a nightmare no one had imagined. As the team continued to investigate, they came across a set of coordinates hidden deep within the Council's records. These coordinates led to a remote facility on a moon, far from prying eyes. The rebel group knew this was where the children were being taken, and where the experiments were being conducted. But when they tried to warn Earth's leaders, they were met with resistance. Some argued that this was a small operation, that it was under control. Others feared what revealing the truth could mean for humanity's place in the galaxy. They had to be careful. The Council's power was too great to challenge openly. But the rebel group knew they had no choice. They couldn't let the Council get away with this. With a heavy heart, the rebel group set out for the facility. They knew that the risks were high. They were going into the lion's den, where the Council's most dangerous forces waited. But they had no other choice. The children had to be rescued. As they neared the facility, the atmosphere grew tense. The once peaceful galaxy was now on the brink of war. The rebellion had begun, but no one knew if humanity would survive it. The fate of the children, and of the galaxy itself, was about to be decided. The plot was thickening, and the stakes were rising. What the rebels would find in the Council's hidden facility could change the course of history forever. Would they be able to free the children, or would they fall into the hands of a power too great to defeat? As the rebel group prepared for what lay ahead, the galaxy held its breath. The countdown had begun, and there was no turning back. The rebel group gathered in secret, far away from the eyes of the Galactic Council. They knew what they were about to do was dangerous, but there was no turning back. The children needed to be saved, and if they didn't act now, it could be too late. Every minute, more children were disappearing, taken away to the Council's hidden facilities. Their futures, perhaps even their lives, hung in the balance. The team, though small, was determined. The group was made up of unlikely heroes, a former diplomat, a scientist with a deep knowledge of genetics, an engineer skilled in technology, and a former soldier who had seen too much to remain silent. Together, they had one goal: to rescue the children and expose the Council for what it truly was. The plan. Their first step was to infiltrate the Council facility on the moon. It was heavily guarded, shielded from detection, and buried deep within the rocky surface of the moon. To even get close would take careful planning and precise execution. But they had one advantage. The Council underestimated the humans. They had been working on this plan for weeks, gathering intel and analyzing every bit of information they could find. The scientists had managed to hack into the Council communication network and uncovered the schedule of shipments, the exact times and locations where the children were being taken. They knew when the next shipment would arrive. The diplomat, once an insider in the Council, used their contact to gather further intelligence. The facility wasn't just a research center. It was a prison, a place where the children were held and experimented on. The diplomat had once been part of a delegation that visited this very facility, so they knew its weaknesses, the blind spots in its security. The engineer had been working on a device capable of bypassing the facility's security systems. With their knowledge of alien technology, they constructed a small, portable device that could temporarily disable the facility's external alarms. It wouldn't last long, but it would be enough to get in undetected. The journey. As the team approached the moon in a stolen transport ship, the tension among them grew. They had been planning this for weeks, but now that the moment had arrived, the fear was undeniable. What if they were caught? What if they couldn't get to the children in time? The former soldier, a woman named Mala, was the first to break the silence. "We're doing the right thing," she said, her voice steady. "These children need us. They are counting on us." Her words were simple, but they were enough to quiet the others. Each of them had their reasons for being here, some personal, some driven by a deep sense of justice. They all knew the risks, but they also knew the stakes. The infiltration. As they landed near the facility, their hearts raced. The moon's surface was barren, with nothing but dust and rock stretching for miles. The facility was buried deep beneath the surface, and the only way in was through a narrow entrance hidden in the side of a mountain. The engineer quickly activated their device, and the security system went down. The alarm shut off, and the team made their move. They moved through the shadows, staying low and avoiding the guards patrolling the area. Their hearts pounded in their chests as they made their way toward the entrance. Inside the facility, the air was cold and sterile. The walls were smooth, and the holes were eerily quiet. The group moved quickly, navigating through the labyrinth of hallways, relying on the information they had gathered. They were getting closer to the children. The discovery. As they reached the central lab, they found the first sign of the children. The facility was a nightmare. Rows of empty beds lined the walls. The children had been here, but they weren't here now. The scientist, Dr. Reed, was the first to speak. "They've been moved. The records are here, but they are recent. They are taking them to a different location." Mala cursed under her breath. "We're too late, but we can't leave empty-handed. We need to find out where they're gone." They hacked into the system, and the screen flickered to life. The scientists found a set of coordinates, hidden deep within the system. The location was classified, but it didn't matter. They had it. "This is it," Dr. Reed said, pointing at the screen. "This is where they are taking the children now. It's even more secure than this facility." A close call. As they were about to leave the room, a noise echoed down the hallway. Footsteps. Guards were closing in. Mala's instincts kicked in. "We need to move. Now." The team rushed to the exit, but they weren't fast enough. The guard spotted them. Shots rang out, and the group ran, barely avoiding the laser blasts. They sprinted through the hallways, their breaths heavy and ragged. The engineer managed to disable the security doors ahead of them, and they made it back to their ship, hearts pounding, barely escaping with their lives. As they lifted off, the facility's alarms began to blare, and the moon's surface disappeared behind them. They had escaped, barely. The revelation. Back on their stolen ship, the group gathered around a small device that held the coordinates. They had learned something important. The children weren't just being moved. They were being transported to a hidden base deep within Council-controlled space. The base was isolated, impossible to reach without drawing the attention of the entire galaxy. But now they knew where the children were. They had a target. The only problem was, this base was the most well-guarded location in the galaxy. The stakes were higher than ever. They weren't just fighting for the children anymore. They were fighting for humanity's survival. The Galactic Council had crossed the line, and the rebellion had begun. The battle was just beginning. The rebellion was small, but their resolve was strong. And as they set their course for the next battle, they knew that the future of the galaxy depended on them. The escape from the facility had been a close call, but it had brought them one step closer to their goal. The rebel group now had the coordinates of the Council's hidden base, the place where the children were being taken. But the victory felt hollow. The knowledge they had uncovered sent chills down their spines. The Galactic Council had always been seen as the defenders of peace, the ones who kept the galaxy in order. But now, the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. The Council wasn't just breaking the sacred law. They were using the children in ways far darker than anyone could have imagined. What they were doing was beyond science. It was pure madness. The group gathered around a table inside their cramped ship, trying to make sense of the information they had stolen. Dr. Reed, the scientist, was the first to speak. The children, they are not just being experimented on, he said quietly, his voice trembling with disbelief. They are being altered. They are being turned into weapons. Marla, the former soldier, frowned. Weapons? How can they do that to kids? Dr. Reed took a deep breath before continuing. The experiments involve something called genetic infusion. The children's DNA is being modified to give them abilities, enhanced strength, faster reflexes, even telepathy in some cases. They are not just experimenting on them. They are creating living weapons, soldiers for the Council, and they plan to use them to dominate the galaxy. The diplomat, who had once worked with the Council, was horrified by the revelation. This is worse than anything I could have imagined, she said. If they succeed, they won't just control humanity. They'll control the entire galaxy. No one will be able to stop them. But the news was worse than that. The children weren't just being altered physically. They were being conditioned, brainwashed, into obedience. The Council wasn't just creating soldiers. They were creating loyal followers, beings who would never question their commands. We're looking at an army of children who have been turned into living weapons, and their loyalty is unquestionable. Dr. Reed continued. These kids will do whatever the Council tells them. They'll be soldiers, spies, assassins. And if the Council uses them against humanity, we won't stand a chance. As the rebel group continued to dig deeper into the Council's records, they stumbled upon something even more terrifying. The children weren't just being taken for military purposes. They were also being used for something far more sinister, a project that could change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. They are trying to unlock a power they don't fully understand, the engineer said, after examining more files. They are using human children because their genetic makeup is unique. It's like they are trying to harness an ancient power, something buried deep within humanity's DNA, a force strong enough to rewrite the rules of the galaxy. An ancient power. Marla asked, "What are you talking about?" The engineer pointed at the screen. It's not just genetics they are tampering with. They are experimenting with something called the essence, a power that exists in all humans. It's dormant, hidden in our minds, but they believe they can awaken it. The rebel group was silent, trying to understand the magnitude of what the engineer had just revealed. The essence was an ancient concept, something that had been whispered about in old texts, power beyond technology, beyond science. It was said to be a force that could bend reality itself, a power that could reshape the galaxy. But the Council wasn't just trying to awaken the essence, they were trying to control it, and they were using human children to do it. The rebel group now understood the true stakes. If the Council succeeded in unlocking the full potential of the essence, they wouldn't just be able to control the galaxy. They would become gods, immortal and unstoppable. "We can't let this happen," Marla said, her voice firm. "We have to stop them before it's too late." With this new knowledge, the rebel group knew they had no choice but to take action. They couldn't wait any longer. The Council's base, the place where the children were being held, was no longer just a place of experimentation. It was the heart of the Council's most dangerous project, one that could lead to the end of the galaxy as they knew it. But there was a problem. The base was heavily fortified. No one had ever gotten close to it without being detected, and the rebel group knew they couldn't just march in and hope for the best. They needed to strike hard and fast before the Council could complete their plans. They made their decision. They would launch a surprise attack on the base, disrupting the Council's operations and freeing the children before they could be altered further. It was risky, but it was their only chance. The group quickly laid out a plan. They would infiltrate the base under the cover of darkness, using the same stealth tactics they had used in the past. But this time, they would have to be even more careful. The Council's forces had grown stronger, and their security systems were tighter than ever. Dr. Reed worked on a way to disable the base's shields, allowing them to get inside. The engineer modified their ship to carry a small but powerful EMP device that could temporarily disable the base's security systems, giving them a brief window to act. Marla would lead the charge, using her military training to guide them through the base. And the diplomat, once an insider, would use their knowledge of the base's layout to help them navigate through the labyrinth of corridors. As the team prepared for the mission, the weight of their responsibility began to settle in. This wasn't just about saving the children anymore. It was about stopping the Council's dark plans and saving the future of the galaxy. The rebellion was no longer a small group fighting for justice. It was a battle for the very soul of humanity. The clock was ticking. The Council's plans were advancing quickly, and the future of the galaxy depended on their success. The rebellion's first strike was about to begin. The days leading up to the attack were tense. Every member of the rebel group knew that the mission to infiltrate the Council's base was their last chance to stop the dark plans from unfolding. They had uncovered enough information to know that the stakes couldn't be higher. The children were at the center of it all, but they also realized that the future of the galaxy rested in their hands. They couldn't afford to fail. The plan was set. The rebel group would infiltrate the Council's most heavily fortified facility and rescue the children. But the deeper they went into their preparations, the more uncertain things became. With every step forward, they began to question whether they truly knew who could be trusted. The unexpected visitor. The night before the mission, the rebel team gathered in their makeshift command center aboard their stolen ship. Everyone was on edge, preparing mentally for the dangerous task ahead. Marla, who had taken charge of the mission's logistics, was outlining the final steps when the ship's comms buzzed unexpectedly. A voice came through the static. It was a familiar voice, Soren, an old ally of the rebellion, someone who had helped them gather intelligence on the Council. His name had been synonymous with reliability, someone they trusted. Or so they thought. "I've got information for you," Soren's voice crackled through the comms. "You're walking into a trap." Marla's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" "I know you're about to raid the Council's base. I'm telling you, it's a setup. Someone inside your group is working for the Council. They've been feeding them intel the entire time. If you go in, you'll be walking straight into an ambush." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Betrayal. It was the last thing the group had expected. Soren's voice softened. "I don't have much time. I can't contact you again. But listen carefully. You're not dealing with a shadow war anymore. Someone in your midst is playing both sides. Don't trust anyone. The Council's grip is tighter than you think." The transmission abruptly ended. The room fell into an unsettling silence. A moment of doubt. Marla's mind raced. She replayed the conversation over and over in her head. Could someone in their own group really be a traitor? The thought was unthinkable. But Soren's warning was clear. The question now was, who could it be? They had worked together for months, but how well did they really know each other? Dr. Reed was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can't ignore this. Soren's warning might be real. If we're walking into a trap, then someone feeding the council information. We need to figure out who. The diplomat, who had once been part of the council, nodded gravely. I never thought there could be a traitor in our ranks. But now, we can't afford to take anything for granted. We need to figure out who's been working against us. The team looked at each other, suspicion creeping into their hearts. Everyone had their own theories, but no one could be sure. They trusted each other, or at least they had. The weight of the betrayal was heavy, and it threatened to tear apart the very foundation of their mission. A fractured team. The rebel group spent the rest of the night in tense silence, as each member kept to themselves, weighed down by suspicion. Who could they trust? Was it the diplomat, with her deep connections to the council? Or was it the scientist, who seemed to always have access to the most critical information? Marla walked alone to the ship's docking bay, trying to clear her mind. She had been in situations like this before, where trust was in short supply and betrayal was lurking around every corner. But this felt different. She had never doubted her team before. Now, every glance felt like an accusation. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned quickly to see Kai, the engineer, standing in the doorway. His face was grim. "You heard what Soren said, right?" Kai asked, his voice low. Marla nodded. "Yeah, I heard it. But do you think it's true? Could one of us really be working for the council?" Kai's eyes flickered, his expression unreadable. "I don't know, Marla, but I don't think we have a choice. We need to find out, fast. Tomorrow's mission can't happen if we don't know who we can trust." Marla clenched her fists. She had trained for countless missions, faced battles with overwhelming odds. But this was different. This was an external enemy they could see and fight. This was someone within their own ranks, someone who had been feeding them false information all along. "We'll deal with it after the mission," Marla said, though the words tasted bitter. "We can't let this stop us now. If we don't act, we lose the children, and we lose everything." The betrayer revealed. The next day, the team was on high alert. They had decided to go ahead with the mission, though they kept a close eye on one another. Every action felt scrutinized, every word carefully measured. The plan was set, but now the trust that once held them together had begun to crack. As they neared the council's base, the tension reached a boiling point. They were about to launch their assault, but their every move felt like it was being watched. Marla was ready to give the order to breach the base when suddenly everything went wrong. The base's shields, which they had planned to disable, stayed up. The security alarms, which they had expected to bypass, blared to life. The doors they had counted on opening remained shut. The entire mission was compromised. Then, just as the group prepared to retreat, they heard a voice from behind them. "I can't let you do this." The voice belonged to Lena, the diplomat. She stepped forward, her expression cold, her eyes hard. "I'm sorry, but I have my orders." Marla's stomach dropped. It was her. The traitor was Lena. The shocking truth. Lena raised her hands, her face filled with regret. "You don't understand. The council promised me safety, power. They promised my family would be spared. I had no choice. I didn't want to betray you, but they've already won. You're too late." The group stood frozen, unable to comprehend the betrayal. Lena's words cut through them like a blade. "You were always going to lose," Lena continued, her voice softer now. "I didn't want to do this, but they've given me no choice." The dilemma. The rebel group was torn. They couldn't believe what had just happened. But they knew one thing. Lena was their only link to the council's inner workings. She held the knowledge of their plans. They could either imprison her or force her to help them. There was no middle ground. Marla looked at Lena, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and pity. "You're going to help us, Lena, whether you want to or not." Lena's eyes hardened, but she nodded. The rebellion was about to face its biggest challenge yet, both an internal battle and an external war. But as they moved forward, the group knew one thing for sure. They couldn't afford to trust anyone again. The betrayal of Lena shook the rebellion to its core. They had trusted her, believed in her, and now she had handed them straight into the hands of the Galactic Council. But despite the crushing blow, the rebellion wasn't finished. Not yet. Marla, now leading with even more determination, knew there was no turning back. The Council's forces had them surrounded, and the clock was ticking. They had one final chance to stop the Council's twisted plan. The children were still out there, and the war for humanity's future was about to erupt. Regrouping after the betrayal, the rebel group retreated to their ship, their hearts heavy with betrayal. Lena had revealed the full extent of the Council's plans, but they were now trapped in the most dangerous part of the galaxy, with their only escape blocked by a massive fleet of Council ships. Inside the ship, the team gathered. The tension in the room was thick. Lena stood at the back, bound by the same cuffs they had once used on enemies. She had given them the coordinates of the Council's hidden base, but she wasn't sure if it would even matter now. The Council was waiting for them. Marla was the first to speak, her voice cold and calculated. "We don't have much time. The Council is mobilizing. They'll destroy us if we don't act. We have one shot at this, and that's all." Dr. Reed was the first to break the silence. "We can't go in blind. We have to disrupt their entire operation, not just rescue the children. If we don't, they'll just do this again." The engineer nodded. "We need to hit them at their weakest point. The base's power grid is the key. Without it, their entire defense system will shut down. We disable that, and we've got a chance." Lena, still bound and silent, was reluctantly asked for advice. The former Council insider, though betrayer, still had critical knowledge. "Once you disable the power grid," she said quietly, "the entire base will go into lockdown. But the children, they'll be moved to a secondary location. You'll need to act fast." "But," she hesitated, her face betraying guilt, "they won't go down without a fight. The Council has a new weapon, something powerful, something you've never faced." Marla's instincts were on high alert. What weapon? What are they hiding in there? Lena's face tightened, and she spoke carefully, choosing her words. "It's not an army. It's not a weapon in the traditional sense. It's a person, a child, one of the experiments. They've given her abilities far beyond what you could imagine. She can control minds. Telepathy, mind control. She'll turn your crew against each other if you're not careful." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. The rebellion was already dealing with forces beyond their control, and now they had to face something they had never imagined, an unstoppable force in the form of a child who could manipulate their very thoughts, control their actions, and possibly bring the rebellion to its knees before they even entered the base. Marla clenched her fists. "We can't let that stop us. We've come too far." Dr. Reed's voice wavered, filled with uncertainty. "But if she's as powerful as you say, how do we stop her?" Lena's eyes softened for a moment, almost as if she regretted what she'd done. "You don't. You have to outsmart her. And you need to do it quickly. The Council doesn't control her. Yet. She's still a child. There's still a chance you can reach her." With the Council's secret weapon now revealed, the rebel group had to act fast. They were no longer just rescuing children. They were stopping a war, preventing the Council from gaining a power that could end all resistance. Dr. Reed and the engineer immediately began working on the EMP device that would disable the Council's power grid. They needed to time it perfectly, so the grid went down at the exact moment they breached the facility. If they failed, the entire base would lock down, and they would never get another chance. Marla and Kai, the soldier and engineer, worked on a strategy to breach the base's outer defenses. They would have to fly in undetected, using the stolen ship's advanced cloaking system. Once inside, they would need to disable the power grid before the Council forces could mobilize. The diplomat, still reeling from betrayal, began working on how to navigate the base's inner defenses. They couldn't trust Lena, but she had given them the most valuable information about the base's layout. The journey to the Council's base was long and fraught with danger. The team had no illusions. This would likely be their final mission. If they succeeded, they could end the Council control over humanity and free the children. If they failed, the rebellion would be crushed, and the children would become the galaxy's most dangerous weapons. The ship silently approached the outer perimeter of the base, cloaked from view. Marla gave the signal, and the team went into position. There was no turning back now. Inside the base, the lights flickered ominously. The team could feel the weight of what they were about to do. They had already come so far, but the hardest part was yet to come. They had to reach the children before the Council could move them. They had to disable the power grid. And they had to survive the Council's new weapon, the telepathic child. As the team prepared to enter the facility, the countdown had begun. The fate of humanity, and of every child being used by the Council, was hanging by a thread. The rebellion's final assault was about to begin. As they breached the outer doors, Marla's voice was steady but filled with determination. Remember, we're not just fighting for the children anymore. We're fighting for the future of humanity. We can't afford to fail. But the truth was, failure wasn't an option. They were up against an enemy they couldn't fully comprehend, a child with the power to control minds, and a council that would do anything to maintain control. The rebellion was at a crossroads. The next few moments would determine everything. They had come this far, and now they had to face the darkest secrets of the galaxy head-on. The rebel group was deep within the Council's hidden base, their hearts pounding as they navigated through the cold, sterile hallways. Every step felt like it could be their last. The stakes had never been higher. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy, and for the children who had been turned into weapons of unimaginable power. Marla, the leader, moved silently through the shadows, the weight of the mission bearing down on her shoulders. The rest of the team followed closely behind, each member focused on the task at hand. But none of them could shake the feeling that they were being watched. The plan was simple: disable the power grid, free the children, and escape before the Council could mobilize their forces. But as they ventured deeper into the heart of the base, they began to realize that things weren't as simple as they seemed. As they reached the central chamber of the base, they encountered their first obstacle, a heavily guarded security checkpoint. The guards, who had clearly been anticipating an attack, were well-prepared and alert. Marla motioned for the team to stop and crouch behind a nearby wall, their breathing shallow and rapid. "What do we do now?" the engineer, Kai, whispered, glancing nervously at the guards. "We need to find another way in," Marla replied, her mind working quickly. "We can't risk a fight here. If we take them out, the whole base will be on high alert." Dr. Reed, the scientist, scanned the wall for a possible weakness. "There's a ventilation shaft to the left," he said. "If we can get inside, we might be able to bypass the guards and reach the power grid directly." Marla nodded. "Good. Let's move." The team made their way to the shaft, using their tools to pry open the vent cover. As they crawled through the narrow, claustrophobic tunnels, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The base felt like a living, breathing thing, its walls pulsing with an unnatural energy. Something was wrong. There was a sense of foreboding in the air, a feeling that danger was closing in on them. They finally emerged from the ventilation shaft and found themselves in a large, dimly lit chamber. The walls were lined with rows of metal doors, each leading to separate holding cells. The children were in there, some awake, some unconscious, but all of them looked far too still, far too lifeless. It was as if the Council had drained their energy, turned them into hollow shells. But just as they approached the cells, a sudden chill ran down Marla's spine. She froze, her instinct screaming that something wasn't right. The air shifted. A whisper echoed in her mind. The voice was calm, soothing even, but it made Marla's heart race. It was a child's voice, but it was unlike anything she had ever heard. It wasn't just in her ears, it was in her thoughts. The others felt it too. Dr. Reed grabbed his head, his eyes wide in alarm. "What is that? Who's doing that?" A figure appeared in the doorway ahead of them, a child, no older than 12, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. She was the one behind the voice. "I am Esha," the child said, her voice echoing in their minds. "I am the future of the galaxy." Marla's blood ran cold. This was a child the telepathic weapon laner had warned them about. The Council had given her the ability to control minds, to manipulate thoughts and actions. And now, she was standing in front of them, blocking their way to the children they had come to save. "You are nothing to me," Esha continued, her voice soft but filled with power. "You are weak. You think you can stop the Council? They are the ones who made me. They are the ones who will rule." Marla's hands clenched into fists. She had to stay focused. "You're just a child," she said, her voice steady despite the fear rising within her. "You don't know what you're part of. You don't have to do this. Escher's expression shifted, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. I don't have to do anything. I want to do this. With a flick of her wrist, the room seemed to warp. The air thickened, and the pressure on Mala's chest grew heavier. The team stumbled, struggling to breathe, their vision blurring. It was as if the world itself was bending to Escher's will. Stay focused. Mala shouted to the group, even as the oppressive force of Escher's telepathy threatened to break their resolve. We can't let her win. But the telepathic assault grew stronger, invading their thoughts. Mala felt the walls closing in on her, saw flashes of her past failures, her doubts, her fears. She saw her team, her friends, turning against her, their faces twisted in anger, their minds no longer their own. No, she shouted, fighting to stay grounded in her own mind. We can fight this. But Escher was relentless. You can't fight what you can't see. You're all mine now. Mala staggered backward, her head spinning, but she refused to give in. She had to hold on. The future of humanity depended on it. Kai, the engineer, stumbled to his feet, his voice shaky but resolute. I have an idea. I just need to access the power grid. If we can overload it, it might disrupt her concentration. We can't stop her if she's in control. Dr. Reed nodded. We'll cover you. Just get to the grid. Mala rallied the team, pushing back against Escher's mental assault. They had come this far. They couldn't back down now. The children were still waiting to be freed. With one last burst of willpower, the team broke free from Escher's influence, their minds clearing for just long enough to regroup. They made a run for the control room, knowing that they only had a few moments before Escher regained control of their thoughts. Inside the control room, the power grid loomed before them, a series of complex systems that held the base's energy in check. The EMP device that Kai had worked on was their only hope. The engineer worked furiously, connecting wires and activating switches, while the rest of the team kept a lookout for incoming threats. I'm almost there. Kai shouted, sweat pouring down his face. Just a few more seconds. Behind them, they could hear Escher's voice, calm and insidious. You can't run from me. I will find you. Mala glanced back toward the door, her heart racing. Kai, hurry. With a final turn of the dial, Kai pressed a button. The EMP device activated, sending a pulse through the base. For a moment, everything went silent. The power grid sputtered, the lights flickered, and then everything went dark. The oppressive weight lifted, the telepathic pressure fading away. Escher's voice fell silent. The team stood in the darkness, their minds finally free. But they knew this was only the beginning. They had one shot, and they couldn't waste it. We're out of time, Mala said, looking at her team with renewed determination. The children are still here. We've come too far to stop now. They moved quickly through the base, heading for the cells where the children were being held. Escher, though weakened, was still a threat, and they couldn't afford to let their guard down. But for the first time in a long while, they had hope. They were fighting not just for survival, but for the chance to save a generation that had been stolen from them. The battle was far from over. But today, the rebellion had won a critical victory. The power grid was down. The telepathic assault had ceased. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the rebel group could breathe without the crushing weight of Escher's mind control. But the battle was far from over. In the darkened silence of the base, the group knew they had to move quickly if they were to escape with the children and stop the Council's final plan. Mala stood at the front, her heart racing as she led her team toward the cells where the children were being held. Their mission wasn't just about freeing the children anymore. It was about ending the Council's reign of terror once and for all. If they failed, humanity would be forced into a future of fear and domination. The rebellion had no choice but to push forward. The final escape. As they reached the cells, the team was struck by the sight of the children. There were dozens of them, some asleep, others staring vacantly at the walls. Their eyes held the same emptiness, the same sorrow that had haunted the rebellion's every step. These were the innocent lives the Council had stolen, twisted into weapons to fulfill their own dark ambitions. The diplomat, once an insider, quickly moved to the nearest cell and unlocked it. "They're all in here," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "These are the ones they've been experimenting on." Mala nodded. Get them out. We don't have much time. The children, still disoriented, looked up at the rebels. Some stepped forward, while others hesitated, unsure of what to do. The transformation they had endured had left them fragile, their minds and bodies ravaged by the Council's cruel experiments. But despite their fear, there was a flicker of hope in their eyes. These were children, not soldiers. They had been used, but they were not lost. The team worked quickly, guiding the children out of their cells and toward the escape route. But as they moved, a low hum echoed through the base, the unmistakable sound of the Council's backup systems coming online. A final showdown. Move! Marla shouted as the light suddenly flickered back to life, the base returning to full power. We've got to get out of here, now. The rebel group, now leading the children through the hallways, pushed forward at a breakneck pace. But they were not alone. The sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, echoed in the corridors behind them. The Council's forces were closing in. From the shadows, Escher emerged, her glowing eyes fixed on the rebel group. Despite the defeat, she wasn't finished yet. You think you've won, she said, her voice seeping into their minds. This is just the beginning. The Council will never fall. Her telepathic power surged again, but this time the rebels were ready. They had faced her once, and they would not fall again. Marla, leading the charge, grabbed a stun rifle from one of the fallen guards. We don't need to win. We just need to escape. Kai, the engineer, fired up the EMP device one last time. I'll hold them off. Get the kids to the ship. I'll take care of the rest. No, Marla snapped. You're coming with us. I'll buy you time, Kai insisted, his voice firm. Just go. I'll make sure they can't follow. The final choice. Marla hesitated, but she knew there was no time to argue. The escape was their only option. All right, she said. Get ready. Everyone, to the ship. The group sprinted toward the exit, but Escher's voice reverberated through their minds. You cannot run from me. I will find you, and I will make you pay. But this time, the rebels were stronger. They had broken free of her control, and now they had one chance to escape. As they reached the ship, Kai activated the EMP one final time. The lights of the base flickered violently, and the security systems went dark again. For a moment, everything was still. The team piled into the ship, the children huddling in fear as the engines roared to life. We're clear, shouted Dr. Reed. But we've got to move fast. They'll be on us any second. The last stand. As the ship took off from the base, the rebel group watched the Council facility grow smaller and smaller in the distance. The children, save for the moment, stared out the windows, their expressions a mix of confusion and wonder. They were free, but the war was far from over. Escher's words echoed in Marla's mind. This is just the beginning. She could feel the weight of that truth, knew that the Council wasn't done. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe that victory was possible. The children, once weapons, were now free. The rebellion had succeeded in striking a blow against the Council. A new beginning. As the ship jumped into warp, the team gathered together. The children, still frightened but no longer alone, were in safe hands. The rebellion had saved them, but the fight for the future wasn't over. They had defeated the Council's immediate plans, but the galaxy was far from free. We did it, Marla said, looking at her team. Her voice was quiet, but filled with conviction. We freed them, but now we fight to make sure this never happens again. Dr. Reed nodded. The Council won't stop, but we've shown them that humanity isn't as weak as they thought. Lena, the diplomat who had once betrayed them, stood at the back of the group. She had given them vital information, but her actions couldn't be forgiven. Not yet. She stepped forward, her face filled with regret. I didn't know. I thought I was saving my family. I never realized what I was helping them do. Marla regarded her for a moment, her expression unreadable. You'll have a chance to make it right. If you want redemption, you'll earn it. And so, as the ship sailed through the stars, the rebel group knew that the battle for the galaxy was far from over. But for the first time, they felt hope. They had freed the children, defied the Council, and struck a blow against tyranny. The war had only just begun, but humanity had a fighting chance.